Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending this Public Information Center for the Windermere Road Improvements Environmental Assessment. My name is Andrew Sercombe, and I'm a manager with our Communications Division at the City of London. Before we get started, I wanted to let everyone know that we're recording this meeting, and a copy of it will be posted on the project's webpage at getinvolved.london.ca/Windermere. That's getinvolved.london.ca/Windermere. For some of us, the webinar version of Zoom is a new experience. I want to thank all of you for joining the call. Please note that you'll be muted for this presentation and your video camera will be turned off for the duration of this webinar. Today, the project team will be sharing a presentation updating you on the Windermere Road project. Joining us on the webinar, we have Paul Yanchuk, Transportation Design Engineer at the City of London. Good afternoon, Paul.
Hi, Andrew.
I'll also introduce the team from Stantec, which is the engineering consultant working with the city on this project. First, we have Kevin Welker from Stantec. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having us today.
We also have Paula Honer from Stantec. Hi, Paula.
Hi, thank you for having us.
And Sarah Lang from Stantec. Good afternoon, Sarah.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Today's presentation will be followed by a question and answer period. To ask your question, we ask that you please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. This icon is located at the bottom of your screen and is marked with the word Q&A. If you have a question, feel free to type it in at any point during this webinar, and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. To ensure that we don't miss anyone's question, we have disabled the chat function for the webinar, so please use the Q&A button. If you are on the phone listening to this webinar and have a question, you can still ask your question through the project webpage at getinvolved.london.ca/Windermere, or you can contact the project team directly by phone call or email, and we'll respond to you as soon as we can. Contact information will be shared on the screen later in the presentation and is available on the project's webpage. Next, your comments are also welcome, and we'll be collecting all of them for the project team to review. Please feel free to leave a comment in the Q&A and the project team will review them all after this meeting. And finally, I'd like to make note that in this presentation, you will hear reference to potential integration with rapid transit in the future. Currently, Council has chosen to prioritize advancing 3 components of London's rapid transit plan: the Downtown Loop, the Wellington Gateway to the south, and the East London Link. More information about these current projects can be found on the city's website, london.ca. The provincially approved Rapid Transit Environmental Assessment that the city completed provides the foundation to continue exploring options for the North and the West. And transportation and transit needs for the North and West London will be further considered holistically through the development of the upcoming Transportation Master Plan beginning later this year. And with that, I'll pass it over to Paul Yanchuk from the City of London, along with the team at Stantec, who will be leading the presentation. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Andrew, for such a great introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to our first PIC for the Windermere Road Improvements Environmental Assessment Study. I'm the city's project manager and one of the prime contacts for this project. So at the end of last year, the city has initiated an environmental assessment for the Windermere Road corridor between Western Road and the west leg of Doon Drive. We procured Stantec Consulting Limited to conduct this study. It was identified that the improvements to the corridor in terms of traffic conditions and transportation infrastructure overall are required along the stretch and in order to facilitate all modes of transportation, such as walking, cycling, transit, and cars. There's also a desire to provide a new cycling connection between Windermere Road and Thames Valley Parkway along Richmond Street. Under Ontario Environmental Assessment Act, municipalities are required to conduct EA studies as part of the planning process for municipal infrastructure projects. And one of the key principles of successful environmental assessment is consultation with affected parties through the entire process. Therefore, this evening, we would like to provide you with an update on the study. The update will include an overview of the related planning and policy documents, the existing conditions, problems that were identified in the area, and opportunities to resolve them, alternative and preferred solution that are considered, as well as the next steps for these studies. As Andrew mentioned, the project team will also answer your questions in the end of the presentation. In terms of project timelines, after this PSC, we are looking to conduct a second public information session in the upcoming fall. The environmental study report should be finalized by the end of this year and will be published for public review. The detailed design phase will start in spring 2022, and the construction phase is anticipated in 2024. And now I'll pass it over to Stantec to present the details of this study. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks a lot, Paul, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this project. The City of London is undertaking a Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, or EA, study to identify improvements to intersections, active transportation, and transit to the Windermere Road corridor. As shown on the map, the study area is located in the City of London along Windermere Road and Richmond Street. The study area is bounded by Western Road at the west end of the study area, Doon Drive at the east end of the study area. They're noting that there's two sections of Doon Drive. This is the westerly section, and the north branch of the Thames River along Richmond Street at the south end. The goal of the study is to provide accessible conditions for all modes of transportation along the corridor within the study area and at the Western Road and Richmond Street intersections. Identify underground water main and sewers that need replacement, and assess the potential to connect active transportation from Windermere Road to the Thames Valley Parkway Trail system. These improvements will support the citywide goal to improve the overall connectivity throughout London. The Municipal Class Environmental Assessment process frames the planning and implementation of municipal infrastructure. This study is identified as a Group C project, Schedule C project, and will follow phases 1 to 4 of the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment process. Social, cultural, and natural environments are considered during the study process, as well as community interests, agency requirements, and unique project issues. Consultation is ongoing throughout the 4 phases, and we welcome your comments and feedback at any time during this study. As you can see in the diagram, we are currently at the end of phase 2. This presentation will provide an overview of the work completed to date and solicit public feedback on the study process and schedule, problem and opportunity and background information, existing conditions, alternative planning solutions, road corridor concepts and evaluation, and the next steps. Several key planning documents have been considered and guide decision-making throughout the study. The City of London Transportation Master Plan, or TMP, identifies strategic outcomes to guide future planning and provides a long-term transportation strategy for transportation and land use decisions through 2030. The TMP proposes the integration of a potential rapid transit network and improved active transportation infrastructure as recommended by the London on Bikes plan to enhance cycling facilities throughout the city. London on Bikes Cycling Master Plan provides a comprehensive guide and blueprint for including active transportation facilities in future planning, design, and development projects. The plan identifies existing bike lanes east of Richmond Street along Windermere Road and proposes implementing new bike lanes on Windermere Road between Western Road and Richmond Street. The London Plan was established to guide planning and city building activities for London's future growth and development through to the year 2035. The plan recommends linkages to promote healthy lifestyles, increased active mobility choices such as walking, cycling, and transit to support safe, affordable, and accessible infrastructure facilities. The plan proposes walking and cycling routes along Windermere Road. The London Plan recognizes the study area as a potential segment of future rapid transit. The potential north end route of the rapid transit network will be further explored by the city in the future, but is outside the scope of this study, as Andrew mentioned. The London Plan also classifies streets in the intended character, goals, and functions to be used for planning and design of public rights of way. Windermere Road is designated as a civic boulevard within the study area. A civic boulevard consists of the following: priority on pedestrian, cyclist, and transit movements. And it moves medium to high volumes of vehicular traffic while having a very high quality pedestrian realm and a very high standard of urban design. The Thames Valley Parkway, or TVP, is the city's primary multi-use recreational trail, offering 40 kilometers of paved surface along scenic river crossings and links to over 150 kilometers of additional pathways connecting all corners of London. There are several gaps in the TVP system requiring people to make use of signed on-road routes. Future projects and upgrades will consider eliminating road crossings and improve neighborhood connections where feasible. Neighborhood connections increase ridership through the improved connectivity with the overall transportation network. The TVP is labeled in the figure on this slide. The project team will explore the potential to connect active transportation facilities on Windermere Road to the TVP trail system. The London on Bike Cycling Master Plan recommends buffered bike lanes along Richmond Street to connect Windermere to the TVP trail. However, alternative design solutions will be explored for this potential connection as part of the next phases of the environmental assessment. Windermere Road is located in the north end of the City of London and is surrounded by developed lands. The London Plan identifies lands within the study area as the following land use designations: neighborhoods, institutional, which includes Western University and University Hospital as part of the London Health Sciences Centre, green space, and urban corridor. In addition to these land use designations, the lands north and south of Windermere Road between Western Road and Richmond Street are identified as near campus neighborhood. This can be associated with increased travel demand by pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users. Trees in the right-of-way were inventoried and assessed by a certified arborist. The first round of field investigations were completed in November 2020 to document bat habitat, fish habitat, map vegetation communities, and inventory fall plant species in the study area. 3 candidate bat maternity roost trees were observed near the intersection with Richmond Street. Woodland communities which may support roosting bats were documented along Medway Creek and northwest of the Richmond Street intersection within Tallwood Valley. The figure on this slide displays the following: significant valley lands, watercourses, ponds, and wetlands, and woodlands. Spring and summer field investigations will be completed through 2021. A cultural heritage assessment report or chart was completed to identify cultural heritage resources, including built heritage and cultural heritage landscapes present and adjacent to the study area. The criteria for determining cultural heritage value or interest is defined by Ontario regulations. The findings of the chart included that 10 properties retain cultural heritage value or interest within the study area, as highlighted on this figure. 4 properties in proximity to or within the study area are listed on the city's municipal registrar of cultural heritage resources. A stage 1 archaeological assessment will be completed as part of the study to determine areas of archaeological potential and property that may retain archaeological resources. Windermere Road is a 2-lane arterial road designated as a civic boulevard, as I previously mentioned. Windermere Road has left turn lanes approaching the intersections and has a posted speed of 50 kilometers per hour. Windermere Road has on-road cycling facilities east of Richmond Street, and these bike lanes are shared with mixed traffic. There are no designated transit facilities along Windermere Road. Transit is part of mixed-use traffic and is serviced by the London Transit Commission, with bus stops and shelters located along the route. Windermere Road has existing sidewalks located along both sides of the road through the entire study limits. A transportation assessment was completed to identify existing transportation conditions in the corridor, considering all modes of transportation. The assessment evaluated several factors which impact the travel demand along the corridor, including population and employment characteristics, land use characteristics, transit routes, active transportation facilities, network capacity assessment, intersection operational analysis, and a multimodal analysis, which looks at the benefits to transit, cycling, pedestrian, truck, and automotive levels of service. Levels of service are a mechanism used to determine how well a transportation facility is operating from a traveler's perspective. The existing conditions transportation assessment considered the level of service for transit, bicycles, pedestrians, and automotive. Levels of service A, B, C, and D are considered to have high levels of service, meaning that these modes of transportation are functioning relatively well within the corridor. Alternatively, levels of service E and F are considered to have a low level of service, meaning that these modes of transportation are functioning poorly along the corridor. The multimodal level of service, or MMLOS, is shown in the figures below, representing the existing morning peak hour conditions along Windermere Road. Transit, in the upper portion of the figure, has levels of service D and F, meaning it generally functions poorly along the corridor. Bicycles have a level of service F along the corridor, meaning that cycling has the lowest level of service and is functioning poorly along the corridor as well. The levels of service along the existing corridor, I should note, is essentially the same between morning peak hour and afternoon peak hours. Pedestrians have a level of service E and F, meaning there's a poor function along the corridor. And automotive has levels of service A and B along the corridor, meaning it functions generally well in those areas. However, the Western and Richmond intersections and the section between Western Road and Richmond Street operate at a level of service E or F, which means it's functioning poorly in those areas. Again, as noted, the level of service along the corridor is similarly represented during both morning and afternoon peak periods. The study has identified key transportation deficiencies in the corridor, specifically related to active transportation, transit, and automobiles. The problems that were identified by the study team include Windermere Road from Western Road to Doon Drive does not fully balance the full range of potential users within the community, including users of all ages and abilities, pedestrians, cyclists, transit vehicles, and motorists. The existing Western Road and Richmond Street intersections with Windermere do not accommodate the potential future rapid transit that are not compliant with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA. Existing water mains and sewers along the corridor may also require replacement. Through the identification of these deficiencies, the City of London has been able to realize the opportunities for improvements along the corridor. Those are supporting safe accommodation for all modes of transportation and users of all ages and abilities, including pedestrians, cyclists, transit, and motorists. Identification of improvements to the intersections at Western Road and Richmond Street to accommodate AODA requirements. The improvements will have the potential to be consistent with the future rapid transit as that gets developed. As well, address water mains and sewers that are required to be replaced in conjunction with these improvements. A number of alternative solutions have been considered for the Windermere Road improvements while respecting the social, cultural, and natural environment. The alternatives under evaluation for this study are do nothing, which maintains the existing condition of Windermere Road, improve other roads in the transportation network, which includes improvements that would take place on other roadways adjacent to or parallel to the Windermere Road corridor, improve transit infrastructure, which includes improvements to infrastructure in the study area to accommodate transit services, improve active transportation infrastructure, which includes improvements to active transportation facilities in the study area to create continuous safe facilities. Intersection and/or operational improvements, which includes improvements to the intersections of Western Road and Richmond Street with Windermere for all modes of transportation, including improvements to address AODA compliance. And provide additional travel lanes, which includes the introduction of additional through lanes within the study area, resulting in corridor widening. The alternative solutions were assessed using the factors and criteria below. Comments received from agencies, stakeholders, and members of the public will be integrated into the criteria as required. Socioeconomic, which includes the potential to address needs of existing and future corridor users, such as potential rapid transit, existing local transit network, pedestrians, cyclists, motorists, consistency with city planning policies, and potential for property impacts. The natural environment, which includes the potential to impact fish and fish habitat, potential to impact significant natural heritage features, and potential to impact significant wildlife habitat and species at risk. Technical considerations, which includes the ability to accommodate traffic demands, ability to accommodate accessibility for Ontarians with disabilities, ability to accommodate active transportation facilities, and improve the overall connectivity to the existing network. Cultural heritage, which includes the potential to impact archaeological resources and potential to impact built heritage or cultural landscapes. To support the accommodation of all modes of transportation, the following combination of alternative solutions are recommended to allow flexibility to address the identified problems. Improve transit infrastructure, improve active transportation infrastructure, including the potential connection to the Thames Valley Parkway, and intersection and operational improvements. This combination of alternative solutions will prioritize the needs of transit, cyclists, pedestrians, and auto users, and will provide sufficient capacity for existing and future travel demand and be AODA compliant. Following this PIC, the project team will complete the next steps identified below. Review and respond to comments received from agencies and members of the public, continue to engage Indigenous communities, and consult with the public and agencies through stakeholder meetings and updates on the project website, develop and evaluate alternative design concepts, confirm the preferred solution, and complete technical studies. Various technical studies will be undertaken over the coming months. These studies are used to help evaluate the alternative design concepts and select the recommended design concept. These steps, along with the recommended design concept, will be presented at the Public Information Center number 2, which, as Paul mentioned earlier, is tentatively scheduled for this fall. Please visit our Get Involved website at getinvolved.london.ca/Windermere, as Andrew mentioned at the beginning. Feel free to ask questions and leave comments for the project team or view the latest project materials. And again, as Andrew mentioned early on, you can access a recording of this meeting. You can reach us with comments or questions using the contact information below. Thank you very much for following along with the presentation today and for your interest in the Windermere Road Improvements Study. Your input is very important to us.
Thank you, Kevin. We'll now begin to take questions, and I see we have a few already that have been submitted through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Just a reminder, to ask your question, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. This icon is located, again, on the bottom of your screen with the words Q&A. Your comments are also welcome, and we'll be collecting all of your comments for the project team to review after the meeting. I do want to note that if you have questions about specific properties or details that you would like to discuss individually with the team, you can leave your contact information in your comment or connect directly with us through phone call, email, or submitting your comment or question through the project webpage on Get Involved. But now let's dive into some of the questions. The first question I want to ask Kevin is, can you elaborate on the timing of this EA, some of the next steps again, and how that coincides with potential decisions around rapid transit and future transportation needs in North London? Are there any connections that we want to share with the group?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So the timing for this project, as I mentioned, is moving towards a completion of the recommended alternative and reconnection with the public in the fall of 2021, with the intended wrap up of the EA for this particular project around the end of the year. So we are aware of other studies within the area that are happening, including improvements to the Fanshawe Park Road and Richmond Street intersection, which is further along in the process than this particular study, since the EA is already complete. But we're also aware of the north leg of the rapid transit. At this point, we understand that that is not moving forward and is part of a future potential assessment. So at this point, this project will look at how to consider future elements of that project so that we don't preclude that type of an overall network improvement from happening.
Thanks, Kevin.
Anything that you wanted to add to that, Paul?
I think you covered really well, Kevin. In terms of rapid transit, like, we are starting a new transportation mobility plan that will consider the potential of rapid transit and will be presented to public and councillors for approval. But at this point, like you, Kevin, said, we're moving ahead with our improvements and have consideration of potential future transit.
Thanks, Paul. The next question I have is, again, about related plans nearby in the area. Is there any connection with this EA and the Masonville secondary plan? Is there any overlap or considerations being taken place between these two plans?
Not specifically, Andrew. We're aware, as I mentioned, of the other studies in the area, but the improvements are certainly more related to the Windermere Road corridor and the studies that are more directly related to this particular segment.
Thanks, Kevin. The next question I have is about the slides that showed the assessments of the Windermere corridor. The question is, were those assessments taken before, during, or during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Sorry, Andrew, I think I had a glitch there. I didn't quite hear the question. My apologies.
No problem. I'll repeat that. The question I have is, were these assessments taken before or during the pandemic, recognizing that maybe transportation volumes have changed?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we do have information from prior to the pandemic. And as you can note, the traffic volumes certainly would be impacted by COVID and even simply routes that people may or may not take as a result of that and their overall destination. So we did have information on the traffic movements, and including all the different modes, as I mentioned, from prior to COVID. So we are able to project those forward, using that information.
Thanks, Kevin. The next question I have is about costs around the project? Is there a budget or any costs associated with this EA, or any provincial or federal funding, or anything related to property taxes?
I'm going to direct this one to you, Paul.
Yes, Kevin, I can take this one. It's a good question. So this project is 80% funded by the development charges. So it doesn't have a direct relation to the property tax. And what was the second part of the question, Andrew?
Is there any funding connected with this project through other levels of government?
And yeah, I guess the remaining percentage of funding will be through growth funds and overall transportation improvements and road improvements budgets.
Thanks, Paul. The next question I have is, have sound barriers been considered as part of this project, and will sound barriers be included along Windermere?
So we're certainly aware of policies around the implementation of noise barriers. At this point in time, as I mentioned, we were sort of closing out phase 2 of the project. So the next steps really include the specific alternative design concepts and what those will be. So you can expect to see further information around what the actual improvements are going to look like, and including you know, the overall, I guess, impact and potential or not for noise barriers at that time in the fall, when we come back to show phases 3 and 4 of the study.
Thanks, Kevin. The next question I have is about the project limits. Maybe we could go to a slide that shows the project limits. Could you explain why these limits were decided, and if there's any opportunity to extend the limits to assess more of the TVP and the connection at Ross Park?
So the project limits themselves deal with predominantly the highest volume sections of Windermere Road. Recognizing that Windermere Road is expected to have active transportation improvements on it, that there was a desire to make a connection between those active transportation infrastructure, or that transportation infrastructure, and the Thames Valley Parkway trail system. So that was the reason for the extension down Richmond Road, was to try to make that connection between, you know, these new improvements along Windermere to the TVP at that point. So it's trying to make sure that there's a linkage between those two, so that the network is a little bit more comprehensive as a whole.
Thanks, Kevin.
And Andrew, just to add to that, the limit along Windermere Road, I guess, it was, in our cycling master plan, we have like a missing link between Western and Richmond Street for cycling facilities, and that was like our main focus as well. And we're also aware of you know, future development at the University Hospital lands, and we want to make sure that we capture that throughout this EA, and hoping to improve you know, the traffic during the peak hours from and to University Hospital and Western properties. So that's, I guess, the main focus as well.
Thanks, Paul. Next question I have is about animals and species in the area. What considerations are being taken as part of this EA to preserve different species in this project area?
So it's a great question. We obviously, the first thing we need to do is figure out which species are there. So one of the things that we've been doing is the natural environment studies, including terrestrial species, fisheries, aquatics. We've been working with Upper Thames Conservation Authority as well to gain information, since they're a valuable resource for this. Understanding what is there is, as I said, the first step. The next step is understanding what improvements we need to make within the corridor. And if we can avoid impacts to species or habitat, that's a first step that we obviously want to take. Aside from that, if we're not able to balance that component, then we look at what mitigation measures can the project put in to avoid impacts on species within the corridor. And that's terrestrial species as well as animals and other species at risk. So we want to have a full picture. And again, avoidance is our #1 priority. It's not always able to happen, as most people can appreciate. But the next step then becomes mitigation. How can we protect them? So that is a focus of our team for sure.
Thanks, Kevin. I have a few comments and questions here about traffic calming initiatives in the area. As part of this EA, are there any plans for traffic calming to reduce speeding of motor vehicle traffic?
So typically, traffic calming is not applied to major arterials. It's generally designated for local road network, which could include residential roads or low speed other roads. Here, as I said, that the area or the idea is to balance several different elements, the movements of pedestrians and cyclists, but also to move higher volumes of traffic. That is what the Civic Boulevard treatment generally does. So typically in those types of treatments, we do not apply traffic calming measures. But as we move forward through the summer and early part of the fall, we'll be looking again at what specific design concepts need to be applied and what those look like through here. So that is a main feature. I think one of the things that, as you look at the cycling infrastructure that exists currently with those shared bike lanes, as you go up the hill to the east on Windermere, you have a very large discrepancy between the speed that the bikes are traveling at and the speed that the motor vehicles are traveling at. So that's certainly a consideration of this team as well. We had a presentation to the Cycling Advisory Committee prior to this. So we have their feedback as well as we move forward in the design, and they'll continue to be a key stakeholder.
Thanks, Kevin. That leads into some of my next questions, particularly about cycling. Can you tell us a little bit more about what a potential connection at the TVP for cyclists might be? And what are some of the constraints that you're encountering around the Thames Valley Parkway for cycling infrastructure?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the connection is covered between Windermere and the Thames Valley Parkway system in the cycling London on Bike cycling master plan. That particular plan identifies the section along Richmond Street as buffered bike lanes. Again, in consultation with the Cycling Advisory Committee, we did get some feedback on that particular application. So we will be looking at options as we move forward again through the summer. The largest constraint for those that know the area certainly is the Richmond bridges over the North Branch of the Thames. And so we haven't been looking at, to this point anyways, specific treatments at that location, but that will be part of the next steps through the summer. So again, hopefully, we'll have that feedback a little bit more definitively for the PIC in the fall.
What would future bike lanes look like in this area? Would they be separated bike lanes, whether it's through a separation or a protection of some sort?
Andrew, I'm not sure if Kevin lost the connection or what happened.
Sorry,
Okay.
I lost my connection, but I am back now. I missed the question.
Kevin. Sorry about that. The next question we have is what would potential bike lanes look like in this project area? Would they be separated or protected bike lanes?
There's certainly options that we'll look at. So we are looking at the types of facilities that are available to us. They could include a simple flush buffer. It could include no buffer between the bike lanes. It could be a cycle track, which is typically raised relative to the adjacent pavement. It could be a fully protected treatment. Again, those are sort of the next steps as we move forward and look at the different design components. One of the things that we have to be careful of when we do consider protection between cyclists and traffic is the location of entrances and intersections. So when we when we make those changes, sometimes visibility of the cyclists is more important than the separation barrier itself. So again, those are all considerations we'll look at as we do move forward through this study, but certainly we are looking at all options and different guidance from both here and in the other parts of North America.
Thanks, Kevin. Are road widenings or extra lanes of traffic being considered as part of this project?
As we did note there, and that was one of the alternatives that was considered. The direction is to not proceed with the addition of through lanes throughout the study limits, or additional through lanes throughout the study limits. So it's more localized improvements around the intersections than it is an overall widening of this corridor.
Thank you. And on the assessments of the area, can you explain briefly again why some of these areas were given F or E rankings?
Sure. So some of it depends on, so if you're looking at vehicle movements as an example, that could be how long a vehicle stays in a queue. So that's delay, how long the queue is itself, if it's in a turn lane. For things like sidewalks, curb face sidewalks where there is no boulevard area is certainly brings the scoring down. If there's obstructions within the sidewalks, that brings the scoring down. If sidewalks obviously don't exist, or bike lanes don't exist, or we have bikes shared with mixed traffic, and again, that happens east of Richmond Street. All of those things have an impact on the overall scores. So, as you can see in this particular slide, hopefully you can still see that it does show what some of those lower levels of service represent. So bicycles, as an example, a level of service F, if the users of it are, again, shared with mixed traffic, have a very large speed discrepancy between them, or speed differential, that can increase the risk to the cyclist and increase the stress, which lowers the level of service.
Are crosswalks or pedestrian crossings being considered anywhere in the project area?
Yeah, so one of the things that we want to look at certainly is the Richmond Street intersection, which has channelized right turn lanes right now. That's where you are you basically make the right-hand turn with some little bit of speed and yield as you try to merge with traffic. Those typically aren't great for pedestrians. So we will be looking at those and how we may be able to change them to improve the safety of pedestrians, while not necessarily negatively impacting the traffic flow through the area either. So those are certainly things that we'll look at. Generally speaking, there are pretty decent crossing points that are at signalized intersections. That's typically what we would want to do. We will consider mid-block throughout the eastern portion of the project limits, if that's appropriate as well.
Thanks, Kevin. And thanks everyone for continuing to submit your comments and questions. We're continuing to go through them. We have a lot of questions and a lot of comments, which is great to see. The next question I've received is, are lower speed limits being considered in the study area for vehicle traffic?
So the speed limit actually was recently lowered from 60 to 50. So we aren't looking at lowering that speed limit any further.
The next question I have is about the TVP and connection at Richmond. Are you looking at both sides of Richmond as part of this study, or only the east and the new bridges and connection in Ross Park?
So the idea is really to connect, as I said, the active transportation measures on Windermere to the existing TVP trail system which exists, I guess, on the south side of the North Branch of the Thames. So ideally, we'll be able to bring it in a safe manner all the way to and connect to the existing trail system. What that looks like, again, that's what we need to work on throughout the next couple of months as we look at the specific design options available to us and the impacts, obviously, of the constraints that exist there. So it's sort of all on the table, I guess, at this point in time.
The next question I have is about pedestrian crossings again. Is there the opportunity to increase or alter pedestrian signal timings to allow more time for pedestrians to cross at these intersections?
Excellent question. So we do have specific time that it takes, or speeds that vulnerable road users actually take to cross intersections. So when we look at the overall improvements of the intersections, we have to be careful when we do consider widening the intersection, that it does have an impact on how long it takes a person to cross the road that they're trying to cross, which may then result in longer time periods where the signals are in a certain phase, or green in a certain direction or red in a certain direction. The longer traffic sits on a red, because it takes longer for the pedestrians to clear the intersection, the more queuing that occurs, the more delay that occurs. So we have to really try to balance all the different road users and make sure that we do consider vulnerable road users and their ability to clear the intersections. So it's certainly the overall, we're looking at it from an overall improvements perspective. I think the transportation looks at it from an ongoing what's out there right now perspective. So, if there are issues from, your perspective, those can be directed to Paul, and he'll make sure the right people at the city get that.
Thanks, Kevin. And just to follow up on that with another question, is there anything else in the project that's being considered to improve pedestrian safety?
Sort of the, I guess the obvious answer to that was the one that I did provide a little bit already, was the changes, or likely changes at Richmond Street with the channelized right turn lanes, and that definitely is not the safest treatment. And when you have a high volume of pedestrians within the corridor, you want to try to change those as much as you can. The other thing I think would be the AODA compliance. So getting tactile plates in there where they should be, having pedestrian push buttons located in the right spots. Those types of improvements are important to affecting the overall safety of the pedestrians within the corridor. So again, those are all definitely components of our study at this point.
The next question I have is about bike lanes, again in this area. Without widening the road, would cycle lanes, would protected cycle lanes fit in the existing space for the road?
The short answer to that is no, they don't. So there has to be some form of widening, curb to curb widening anyway, that would permit them to fit within that existing road network. So that's certainly one of the reasons for this project is, you know, it's not as easy as just tacking them on or tacking on a multi-use path or something like that. Yeah, there's definitely impacts as a result of trying to incorporate the active transportation measures.
The next question I have is about red light cameras. Are red light cameras being considered as part of this EA? And is there the opportunity to add additional red light cameras in the area?
So I guess maybe I actually should direct this one to you, Paul, but
yeah, sure. I guess yeah, red light cameras weren't discussed as part of this EA, and it's like a separate Vision Zero program that we have, and currently we don't. I haven't heard of any plans to add new red light cameras along or within this study limits. So the existing red light camera most likely will stay, but our Vision Zero team will be looking into whether it should stay there or whether it has to be moved.
The next question brings us back to the Western Road and Richmond Road intersections along Windermere. Can we outline again what improvements are being considered at these intersections for all road users?
So at this point, again, we know that there will be some form of improvement, which may include widening of those intersections to add right turn lanes as an example, deal with the high volume movements predominantly. If you look at the Richmond Street intersection as an example, eastbound and westbound, there are no right turn lanes. So that's certainly one point of interest through here. You know, same thing at Western Road. We do have to balance that with the potential property impacts and other constraints. As an example, on Western Road, there is the bridge over Medway Creek, and so that becomes a bit of a constraint to that particular intersection and improvements that we do or can do there reasonably. So at this point, we know that improvements are required generally along the lines that I just mentioned, but that is really the next phases for us, is looking at specifically what can we fit in, what really provides the largest improvement to levels of service. Again, bearing in mind that we're looking at multimodal level of service, not just vehicular traffic. So again, improvements such as dual left turn lanes might positively affect that particular left turn movement, but negatively impact other components, whether that's pedestrian movements, cyclist movements, or the fact that other phases or durations of green and red signals slows down movements in the intersection and make things actually worse. So lots of different things to consider, all happening in the next couple of months.
The next question I have is about the timeline. I'm wondering if we could go back to the timeline and next steps slide. This question, recognizing that it's early in the EA, but what are the next steps for this project? When might this area see construction, and how long would construction potentially be?
So the first part of that I'll answer, I guess, and then I can turn it over to you, Paul, for the construction component of it, timing of construction. As I said, over the next couple of months, we are looking at these alternative design concepts. That's the actual design of the improvements at different locations throughout the corridor. We have certain stakeholders within this area that are certainly interested in, and we will continue to have dialogue with them. That includes London Transit Commission, Western University, University Hospital. So lots of different portions of consultation that need to happen over the next few months. We intend on coming back to the public in the fall with the preferred solution, as I mentioned, looking to wrap up the EA phase prior to the end of this year. So Paul, maybe over to you for the steps beyond that.
And as I mentioned at the introduction, in spring 2022, we're planning to start the detailed design, get ready for construction. And I guess will depends how the design goes and what the property impact will have. Our tentative scheduled construction year is 2024. And the duration of construction will depend on the improvements that we'll identify, like over the summer and then during the detailed design, but it could be from one season to slightly more.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Kevin, for helping clarify that. I'm continuing to see a number of comments come in, which we really appreciate. All of these comments are going to be packaged together for the project team to review afterwards. If you have any comments or questions about specific properties, please feel free to include your contact information in these comments. And the project team will reach out to connect with you, or you can visit our Get Involved webpage, the project webpage, to contact the project team directly. We did have a few comments and a question about AOTA. Would we be able to just quickly reflect on what AOTA means and how AOTA is being applied to this project?
Yeah, so AODA compliance is related to making sure that the corridor is accessible. So oftentimes most people think of it as the tactile plates that you would see. Those are the rough metal plates at pedestrian crossings, crosswalks at intersections. So that's one element. There's the pedestrian push button locations. So when you go to cross a signalized intersection, cross the road at a signalized intersection, it's the proximity of where that push button sits. It's got to be in a certain location. It might be the chirping that you hear from the pedestrian signals when you're crossing the road in a certain way that helps certain people identify the clear path for them. So really it's all about making sure that the corridor itself is accessible and safe for all road users, and that includes pedestrians and cyclists and all sorts of different components. So and that is vulnerable road users as well. So maybe people that have vision impairments, that you know, these elements will help them cross the roads safely.
The next question I have is, are the utility markings and small flags placed in the area connected to this environmental assessment? And can these flags be removed from properties?
They may be, they may not be ours. We did have components where we did have locates requested. That's what those are. It's the utility companies identifying where their underground plant is located, so that we don't hit it if we're doing things, you know, that have subsurface investigations. But they may not be ours, so I would not recommend removing those. They're there for a reason. It might not be ours. It might be somebody else that has, you know, is digging in the area, and they need to have access or need to know where those are, so they don't hit a gas main or hit a different utility, as an example.
Thanks, Kevin. Are there considerations to expand the project area to include more construction all at once to avoid further construction delays or further nearby construction in the future? Or are these project limits set for the moment as part of this EA?
I guess the simple answer is that the limits are set for the purposes of the EA, and making sure that we've captured all the different components of this particular environmental assessment and the impacts from the project improvements. Once the EA phase is complete, there's certainly, if there's other local improvements that need to happen in the area, you know, transportation or other divisions within the city could collectively identify that they could be grouped together if there's a benefit to the city or to the road users in the area from an impact perspective. But the EA is sort of standalone from other improvements that may or may not be happening in the area.
The next question, oh, sorry, Paul.
Andrew, I can add to that as well. So as part of this EA, we're also looking into underground infrastructure as well, right? The condition of it and what needs to be replaced or expanded. And during we want to plan for the construction to happen and get all the underground stuff fixed and replaced as well, so we don't have to come back. So this will happen within the study limits, so we'll cover that.
The next question I have might be for you as well, Paul, or Kevin, feel free to jump in. But during construction, what impacts might residents or properties experience? What might construction look like for a resident in this area?
So I can tell that obviously there will be some traffic impact, right? Reduction of lane is part of any road construction project. Usually there is some, you know, excessive noise and I don't know, depending on the property, right? There could be even some vibration as well. But typical construction impact as people experience around the city, I would say. We always try to limit the road closures, right? So we don't want to close any roads, especially access to the university and university hospital.
Thanks, Paul. At the moment, I don't have any new questions in the queue. A few more comments coming in around the project, which we appreciate. If anyone would like to learn more about this project or has a question or would like to go back to another slide, please feel free to enter that in the Q&A. I'm seeing a few questions come in. Thank you, everyone. The next question I have is, how will emergency vehicle access be impacted during construction? Will emergency vehicles be able to access residents and properties when construction is happening?
Yeah, so that's always a key component of any construction project, is making sure that emergency services are aware of the project and the constraints that may happen. Roads that may be closed to the overall public would often still be open to emergency services, and contractors typically would be there to help emergency services actually access certain locations. So again, it's a little early in the process to know exactly what improvements are being done. Following the EA phase, there will be a detailed design phase where they look specifically at, you know, how big excavations would be, where traffic would be located. One of the big components of this job is obviously the access to University Hospital and the location of the emergency room there. So making sure that we've engaged with LHSC, which we have already and will continue to throughout the rest of the project, is definitely a key element. We don't want anybody slowed down that may be in an ambulance or maybe on their own trying to get to the hospital. So we are and will continue to be in consultation with them.
Thanks, Kevin. The next question I have is about potential improvements to public transit in the area. What public transit improvements are being considered to reduce traffic or improve traffic, specifically in the area near University Hospital and Western? Would we be able to go back and outline some of the potential improvements to public transit?
So certainly one of the elements there, because transit is mixed with traffic, any improvements that we can make to the functionality and the operations of the major intersections, Western Road and Richmond Street, will alleviate congestion that buses often get caught up in. I did mention another project early on, which has a direct impact on this particular project for anybody that's used Richmond Street, are the improvements at Fanshawe Park Road in Richmond. Those improvements will help traffic flow throughout the area. Oftentimes at certain points in the area, you'll see significant backups from Masonville Mall area back through to this project. So, you know, that project moving forward will have a direct impact on the operations of the intersections within the study limits here. But again, if we can get all sorts of traffic moving a little bit more freely within this corridor, that will have a positive impact on transit usage for sure.
Thanks, Kevin. I don't have any further questions at the moment, but I will add that this team's going to continue to be on the call until 7 o'clock. I do want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Our presentation is complete, but we're still here to help answer questions just in case anyone drops in later this evening. As a reminder, we'll be posting this presentation on the project's webpage tomorrow morning and collecting feedback through the Get Involved website over the coming weeks. If I may ask that we go back to the last slide of the presentation with the contact information, please. You'll be able to review the presentation and slides at this website, getinvolved.london.ca/Windermere. And you're more than welcome to continue to engage with the project through the project manager, Paul, or through Kevin and the team at Stantec. If you don't have any more questions, I see a few questions have come in, but please feel free to enjoy the rest of your evening. For anyone who's dropping off the call at the moment, I do want to express our thanks for joining us and encourage you to continue to visit the Get Involved. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to answer a few more questions that have come in. I see a few more comments as well, and we'll be on this call until 7 o'clock this evening. The next question I have is about the Fanshawe project that you had mentioned, Kevin. Will that project, along with this project, be constructed at the same time? Do we have any more information that we can share about timing of construction for these two projects?
Andrew, I'll take this one.
Thank you, Paul.
So as I mentioned, the Windermere EA, the implementation phase, which is construction detail design, it will not happen until 2024. And Fanshawe Park Road and Richmond Street intersection is currently in detail design, and we hoping to start construction in 2022. So not likely that these two projects will overlap or coincide.
Thanks, Paul. The next question I have is again about the project limits. Why was Doon Drive the limit on the east side of this EA?
I can maybe Kevin also respond to this question. So initially, the project limits of Windermere EA were from Western Road to Richmond Street, but we also looked closer at the east side of the limits and thought that that the hill with missing bike lane might pose any concerns. So we decided to extend Doon Drive to cover off that section. And further down from Doon Drive, West Leg, there is a bike lane, and then it becomes a share lane as well. So hoping to cover that hill and provide a proper cycling infrastructure there, will have a good benefit for this corridor as well. I don't know,
Thanks,
Kevin,
Paul.
if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I guess I think the biggest thing is what you mentioned there. There's existing bike lanes that are separated facilities as you go further east on Windermere Road from that point. So it's looking at making the connection really between this piece that has the on-road shared lanes with those ones that are actually separated to the east, and then west of Richmond Street, there aren't any right at that point. So it's trying to make that whole corridor a little bit more consistent through this area.
I don't have any other questions submitted at the moment. A few comments have come in, Kevin, around pedestrian safety and pedestrian experiences. Would we be able to review some of the improvements for pedestrians that are considered as part of this project?
Yeah, so those, we will identify those again in the fall PIC, that as we identify the specific improvements through the summer, particularly at the intersections, how the active transportation components come in, and any improvements to pedestrians. We'll cover that definitely in the fall public meeting. If there's certain user experiences that I think you mentioned there, feel free to share those with us. I mean, we all have our own experiences using this corridor in certain ways, but the more information we can get from people on their experiences with the corridor, I think is helpful to us.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, we've had a number of comments made about experiences from cyclists, pedestrians, public transit users. And again, all of these comments are going to be packaged together and shared with the project team after this presentation. I'll just add that the second PIC that's been mentioned, we'll be promoting that through our Get Involved webpage as well. We don't know what type of format that might be at the moment, if it's going to be another Zoom webinar, but we'll be including more information about that on the project page closer to the fall. I don't have any further questions at the moment. Again, we're going to be on the call tonight until 7 o'clock, just in case anyone drops in who would like us to review the presentation again. I do want to thank everyone for joining us on this Zoom webinar tonight. I appreciate everyone's comments and questions that have been submitted this evening, and we'll continue to keep the community updated through the Get Involved platform, the City of London's website, getinvolved.london.ca/Windermere.